Thank you. All right, so I believe we have a good full house, and I don't see anyone else popping in. I will watch, but Linda, we are recording and ready for you.
Okay, this open meeting of the Triton Regional District Communication Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, in response to the COVID pandemic, and the provisions extended through March 31st, 2025 by the FY23 supplemental budget signed by the Governor Haley on March 29th, 2023. These provisions suspend the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School District Communications Committee on February 6, 2025 at 6 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons are anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brian Forget.
Here, and I can hear you. Sorry, I muted myself.
Brian Perry.
Yes, I'm here and I can hear you. Thank you.
Jeffrey Walker.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Christine Nealon.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Neil Harrington.
I'm here, I can hear you.
Paul Lees.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Richard Keys.
I'm here loud and clear.
Michael Colburn.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Terry Marangi.
Here and I can hear you.
Caitlin Hunter.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Erica Jacobson.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Kelly Smullen.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Matthew Landers.
I'm here and I can hear
you. Narissa Wallen.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Patrick Heffernan.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paul Goldner. Paul Lees.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paul
Again.
Mayette.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Ronald Lee Parrott.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Tracy Blas.
I'm here and I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I think I got everybody.
Sherry David is here, Linda, for the.
Sherry's with Christine. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sherry.
Say it again.
For this meeting, the Triton District Communications Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district website, identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video to conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I appreciate you taking the time on relatively short notice for this discussion. The last DCC meeting was pretty sparsely attended, and with the Triton budget due to the towns in about 6 weeks, the school committee has to start giving the administration final targets soon. The proposed Triton budget still has a lot of uncertainties in it, and combined with having very little information about the town's fiscal year 26 financial scenarios and how projected costs and revenues may or may not differ from the norm, it is very hard for the committee to have informed discussions. The District Communication Committee exists for information sharing, and I'm going to ask the superintendent to begin by going over what he shared at the last DCC meeting, including any updates, and then I would appreciate any information on the town's financial situations that will help the committee. So I'll hand this to you, Brian.
Thank you, Linda. So there are two documents that are attached to the board docs agenda for this evening, the meeting posting. There was a multi-page summary, which is a summary that was presented to the school committee on January 25th and captures all of the requests that each of the building principals and other district administrators presented directly to the school committee back in mid-January. So I'm not going to go through that document in detail, but just to point out some of the major drivers this year. You know that we are any given year, we're in the $1 million to $1.25 million, depending on increases for our salaries across the district. We're about 1.3 this year, all in, all salaries, all personnel, all bargaining units. So that is always a course driver. A budget cost driver, given that we are largely a personnel-based organization. Another driver this year is our transportation, roughly $250,000. We did rebid our transportation. We had two vendors at the table, which is the first time in quite a while. We had Coach also show up with NRT, and I do believe that kept the costs down. Doesn't mean they went down. I think it kept them from where they could have gone. We have talked to districts who have seen 20, 30, 40+% increases in their transportation as the number of vendors has collapsed. And so it was good to see another vendor at the table. Unfortunately, they were about $825,000 more over the 5-year contract. I don't know if you participated in any of those conversations or saw those, but the committee did have discussions both in December and in January. Pretty pointed discussions about the concerns about staying with NRT. Ultimately, we have a contract with them that clearly we have said publicly and privately with them that we are not satisfied with the service and they need to be better. We have a contract that now provides penalties that I believe I should say penalties and incentives for drivers and such that hopefully they can build their driver base and then their on-time performance. We have the ability to issue penalties. So even with all of that, even being the lower of the two bidders, it's still about $235,000 per year more. That was a driver this year. And I would say I should call out the fact that while transportation was a driver, about 230 regular ed, about 145 for special education transportation. Special education out of districts actually went backwards about 300,000. So that certainly speaks to the in-district programs. Shannon Nolan, our Director of Student Services, and lots of people. As Linda says, it takes a village, right? And our goal is to build programs so that we can keep our students here in district with their peers whenever possible. So those are not rarely are those cheap programs to develop, but they do end up being cost effective. So that's certainly a silver lining. Wasn't enough to solve the other problems. The other big driver for us this year, and I'm assuming the towns are dealing with the same thing, is healthcare costs. So we are a part of the Maya Healthcare Trust. I know Newbury and Rowley are also part of the trust. Salisbury is not. Was talking with another regional district today who is seeing a 27% increase in their health insurance. They're not with Maya. They said they want to join Maya, to which I got off that call and said, make sure we don't let them into Maya. So they're just huge costs. It's the school committee is currently in negotiations with our public employee committee. The PEC is what we formed. I don't remember how many years ago. It's about 9 years ago. I think it was 3 contract cycles ago, if not 12, and pulled all of our healthcare. It was 12 years ago. Pulled all of our healthcare negotiations out of individual contracts, and so they are negotiated in the collective. So it's one body that negotiates with representation from all the unions the healthcare plan provided to all district employees. So that is currently in process. We budgeted for a 15%. The Maya Trust as a whole set their range. It's roughly 10% up to 20%. We expect our renewal by tomorrow. I begged, and I was checking my email up until about 5:59 we begged to see if we could get that renewal tonight before we had this discussion. I have not seen it, but I expect that it's it's going to be roughly 15%. It could be a little worse, could be a little better, but based on the data, we're looking at roughly $1 million increase just in healthcare alone. So I won't go into detail on anything else in that summary. Again, the way that 8-page sheet is outlined is that it gives you the initial request and then some work that we did to prioritize things that are must do, which are, it's a contract, we have no choice. Cost avoidance example is further in the document, there's a physical therapy assistant. We're providing that through a contracted service. It's more cost effective for us to hire a halftime PTA. So things like that we code as cost avoidance. It's a service we have to provide. It's more cost effective to add that position in, and then higher or lower priorities. So there will be a document that the school committee will look at following this meeting at 7 o'clock that has a little more further clarification on certain things. But that is the result of the work that we did at the January 25th Saturday workshop, setting those priorities. The other document that's included is very similar. It's the first page is the same as what was provided at last month's DCC. It shares with you, as you know, our budget is one piece of the challenge as a regional school. First, there's our expenses and revenues. The second piece of the challenge as a regional school is how we apportion that to our member towns. We've spoken for many, many years, more than a decade now, about an alternative assessment, another way to assess, but without having that in our regional agreement, we use the statutory method. Every town pays their minimum local contribution first, and then the amount above minimum local or required contribution is apportioned based on each town's share by October 1 student enrollment, student foundation enrollment, which is a DESE creation in the way they count. So the other document is actually 2 pages now because it has some further information that was provided to the committee on the 25th. The first page outlines the 2 factors that we are always waiting for the governor's budget to be issued so we can get, and that is each town's minimum local contribution and each town's foundation enrollment. This year, the foundation the minimum local contributions is going to be, in this process, it is a major driver. Newbury's minimum local or required contribution increased by about 1.1%. Rowley's increased by 6.12%, and Salisbury's by 2.01%. So that discrepancy is creating a huge swing in Rowley's share of the pie, if you will. The second piece of that is enrollment. Newbury actually increased. Newbury decreased the smallest percent, right? Down 1.94%, Rowley down 2.68%, Salisbury down 3.97%. And in the share, Newbury actually picked up 0.3% of the pie. However, that minimum local contribution is the overriding factor here clearly this year. So the bottom of that page, what that shows you is it's not a real calculation. We're not reassessing fiscal 25, but that box with the blue banner shows you that if we took this year's budget, fiscal 25, kept all other things the same, adjusted the foundation enrollment and the minimum local contributions, you can see that it takes away 83,561 from Newbury. It takes away 162,790 from Salisbury, and it gives it to Rowley's assessment. So Rowley's assessment would go up $246,351. Again, that's not a real assessment. That's an example to show the impact of those 2 factors at the top of the page. So that is the starting point, right? That's where we begin the discussion. If there was a $0, not percent or not level services, none of that. If there was a $0 increase to our budget, Rowley's assessment would still go up $250,000. Down the bottom of the page, the only assumed increase that we are, or the only increase in revenues we are assuming at this point is Chapter 70. The governor included a minimum increase for minimum student aid of $75 per student. That translates to $156,900. Thankful in the past years, we've been assuming 30 because that's what the governor's budget has. Set that floor in the budget development process at 75 per pupil. I would love to see that go up. I think there's more of an appetite in that the legislative leaders for our state have signaled and publicly stated that there needs to be a fix for public education funding. So with 227, I believe is the number, districts falling into the Triton situation where we are hold harmless, minimum aid is all we're getting in new Chapter 70. With over 2/3 of the state now in that category, there certainly is a majority of folks who are saying, all right, we need to fix this. And so the hope is that there will be some more minimum aid that will help bridge that gap. So at this point, the other major driver we always talk about each year is regional transportation. The governor's budget does include a reimbursement at 75%. I'm sorry, 95%. Jay Sullivan at the Department of Ed does his own workings and what gets posted on the cherry sheet. And the cherry sheet actually shows us a loss of revenue. The reality is there seems to be motivation to keep it funded at that 95%. The challenge is the governor used one-time funds out of the millionaire's tax in order to fund that through an interesting mechanism with vocational transportation that we don't have to go into details, but it would likely give us 95%, but I don't think there's a huge appetite for funding an ongoing operational cost using one-time funds. So at this point, we haven't assumed any change in regional transportation, just that $75 per pupil. So that was the document I went over last month at the DCC meeting. The second side, or when it prints two-sided, but the second page is the cost of the other summary document. If you take the must-dos, right, the kind of required expenses, as well as the cost avoidance, the total expenses increased our budget by just shy of $3.3 million. I've seen that. That's been discussed, I know, with various select boards. That $3.278 million is not a proposal. It's not a recommendation. That was kind of level services moving into next year. You can see in the bottom what that means for increases in assessments. Again, I meant to put in a big draft, not final watermark on this, because I know oftentimes we've had these discussions and folks walk away and think it's done. It's far from done. But that is provided as an example of if just the cost of doing business, just bringing that into next year, we're at a roughly $3.3 million increase, which would have an increase of close to 7%, 6.8% for Newbury, close about 9.5% to Rowley, and about 6.5% to Salisbury, with both Rowley and Salisbury over $1 million increase. I don't want to speak on behalf of the committee. I think I'm very clear that those are not numbers that the towns can absorb, right? Those are not figures that can be absorbed into the general operating budget. So after this discussion with the committee, I think the goal for tonight was to get back around it's not a table this time, it's a screen, but to get back around the screen and have a discussion about where things need to be targeted so that they can give us guidance and we can make decisions. I can make proposals about how we would likely reduce and make reductions in the budget and cuts to get down to a figure that is workable. So any questions? Shocking, Brian just talked a lot. But any questions about that information?
No. So if we could start taking questions, concerns from anybody in the town. Anyone wants to go first?
Linda, I have a question.
Certainly.
Good. I wasn't positive you could hear me. And this isn't meant to be like a gotcha or anything. I'm just curious. How are or is teachers' insurance paid for? Is it paid a portion by the teachers themselves? How are insurances paid for, and does it include retirees?
Good question. So that is something that is negotiated, right? Similar to each of your towns with your bargaining units. So we, as I mentioned, we collectively bargain together with all bargaining units, teachers, paraprofessionals, instructional assistants, custodial workers, and cafeteria workers through AFSCME. All of those groups have a representative. We sit at the table, meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. In the negotiations for that, through that public employee committee and negotiating with the committee is both plan design, right? How much you pay for copays to go to a PCP or your specialist or your prescriptions or inpatient, outpatient. Is there a, what do you call it? Deductible. So we have an HMO through Maya. It's called like Benchmark 3. It's a pretty typical plan compared with the GIC, which is the state program. We also offer a high deductible, which is a lower premium, but you have a really high deductible, and we contribute to an HSA if you do that. The second piece of that puzzle is the cost share, which is what you're asking about. So currently on our HMO and dental plans, we offer a 70-30 split. So the district pays 70% of the premium, employees pay 30% of the premium. So that is all HMOs and dental insurance. On the PPO, it's the district pays 61, so a PPO is an indemnity. So it only makes sense to pay a higher cost if you are living out of New England, because our HMO plans are New England plans. So if you retire and move to Florida, you need to be on a PPO to continue with the plan. We pay only 61% of that, and the employee at that point, the retiree, usually it's not a whole lot of actives on those plans. The retiree pays 39%. We currently have for retirees. A retiree who is on, so I should, for dental, it stays the 70-30 split for retirees. For medical, a retiree who retires before age 65 stays on that active plan, and the district pays 70% of that active plan until they turn 65 and become Medicare eligible. When they go on to Medicare, we then offer a Medic supplement plan, which is literally a fraction of the cost for the plan, and we pay 70% of that Medic supplement plan, and they pay the 30% as a retiree. So I know that is a discussion, that is an active discussion. So I don't want to talk out of negotiations, but those are active discussions with the PEC and things being looked at. And it's already been a discussion with them. So we're looking at where we compare with other districts, other towns. I know within our 3-member towns represented on this screen, Rowley has a much lower cost share, where Newbury and Salisbury are more similar to us at that 75-30 or 75-25 share. But that's where we're currently at, is the 70-30 as a standard.
That was a very thorough answer. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to talk about their towns?
Hi, Linda. It's Kristen Sherry. So I just kind of want to let the group know what we're dealing with in Rowley. So currently we're negotiating 3 union contracts. We are working on 24/7 overnight fire coverage. We dismantled our communications center and went with State 911 last August, which has given us some savings to work towards our goal of getting overnight fire coverage, but it's based on what the fire chief currently wants in place, it's still not enough. We have cost of living for the town employees has been steady at only 2% increase since 2019, with the exception of the FY21 year, it was a 2.5% increase. Health insurance, as we all know, is going up. In FY25, it was an 8.7% increase, but we're hearing that it could potentially be double digits. Meal taxes are down, our cannabis taxes are down. We just don't have as many taxable parcels as Newbury and Salisbury. So again, we had sent the school committee and Brian Forget, you guys received a letter from our Board of Selectmen signed by Cliff Pierce last February 7th, indicating the situation that we would potentially be in for the FY 26 year, in which we meant it possibly having a Prop 2.5 override. So that's our situation in Raleigh.
Thank you, Christine.
So just confirming, Christine, you said that it was the letter you sent last year, knowing this was coming. There wasn't a new letter.
No.
was-
Yeah, it was
Okay.
dated, it was from Cliff, dated February 7th of last
Okay.
year, basically indicating that, we based on the state's formula and so forth, we're just having a difficult time with this. And
Yeah.
that, I believe the letter, and I looked at it again today, did mention the possibility of doing an override for FY 26.
Yeah, I do remember that. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss a letter because I hadn't seen it.
Nope, that was, last year.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? Chris, I don't want to put you guys on the spot. I don't know if you have information about this. But when we were looking at minimum local contribution, it looks like DOR is expecting Raleigh to actually have higher revenues this year. Like that's sort of part of the driving factor. Do you have any idea why that could be?
I don't, Nurse, I honestly don't know. I can probably try to find that out, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
It's fair. It's like not published out yet, so I can't even there's nowhere deeper to dig on that really. I'm just curious if you, in the discussions that you had, if anything had come up, like, oh, there's this new thing, or there's only so many widgets you can, in my mind. But
Yes,
New building.
yeah, Sherry just said she doesn't believe we have anything in the pipeline for that.
okay,
Any new businesses or anything.
okay, thanks.
Linda, where we have representation from the Finance Committee and Tracy is here, rather than me get involved with something that they would be better speaking to, Tracy, can you take and speak to where we are?
Sure. I think we sent a similar letter last year talking about the potential of considering overrides for this fiscal year in the event that we'd be looking at percentage increases of the magnitude that we had last year. We were the community that had the big increase in our minimum local contributions. So this year, I think at this stage of our budget preparations, the select board has, committed to using our 50-50 model, in which we look at all of our additional revenues that we expect to receive in fiscal year 2026. And right off the bat, we commit to spending 50% of those to offset any increases in our educational funding assessments. This year, we're looking at about $400,000, and that will not likely meet what the district's needs are. So that's, in a nutshell, really where we are right now.
Thank you, Tracy. Is there anybody from Salisbury that would like to speak, or?
Dale, do you want to speak on this?
Sure, we're just rolling in dough over here, so no worries. That was a joke. And we're facing the same challenges as the other communities, but we're also looking at the big picture of a likely override being necessary to fund the new building at Triton and the new building at Whittier, even though we may be looking at 3, 4, 5 years out. If we get into looking for overrides for operating budgets and then ask the voters 2 or 3 years after that, 4 years after that, to look at overrides for, multi-million-dollar buildings, which we hope to be able to support, we don't know how that's going to play out. And so I just urge everyone at the district to consider the bigger picture here. We don't want to erode our future support for the new buildings by having to come to our voters maybe this year or the year after or both for operational overrides. So that's a problem. for us. Having said that, the proposed, well, first cut number for Salisbury is just something that we cannot afford without an override. We were looking at with my finance director the last 2, 3, 4 years of increases, which fortunately we were able to handle despite some revenue challenges, as has been alluded to by Christine. So, you know, just to give you a sense, a 3.5% increase, which is where we were last year, would be about $557,000 for Salisbury, and the recommended number is over $1 million. So I'm not saying we necessarily have to hold ourselves to 3.5%, but you know, some number in between, you know, 550,000 and $1,050,000 is something that we're going to have to come to agreement upon, or else it's going to be difficult for us to support it.
Thank you, Neil. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Linda, I got something for Brian. Brian, quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can answer it, but I got a question.
Yeah.
It seems all 3 towns can't afford the budget. Where's the cuts going to come from?
So that is right. That is an active discussion. I think it will depend on where the final number is. You know, Neil just talked about something between last year's number and $1 million. So if we're talking, say we're at 3.5 now, and it needs to get to 2.5, 2.75, whatever the number is. If we're talking about $1 million in reductions, we are definitely talking about classroom-based personnel, right? I mean, I think we're certainly talking about how do we balance that and make sure that we're talking about administration, district administration, school administration. But to make that level of cuts, you know, that we reduced, you know, our STEM and our SEL teacher last year to get this balanced. So those type of, I don't want to call them extra, right? And they're certainly needed programs. But if we're talking about the core of a classroom teacher and the students, our literacy and math specialists and students, our special educators and students, outside of that, right, we're down to individuals who are directly servicing students. If we're talking about $1 million, I would say. I don't yet have that list of what it would be.
Can I make a suggestion?
Of course.
When you called me a couple of Saturdays ago and you said, you know, bring your thoughts, your ideas, suggestions, and I've given this a lot of thought. So I was just wondering, would it be cost effective to move the 3 6th grades to the middle school and have our elementaries become the pre-K through 5? I did a lot of research on this the last couple of days, and most of the schools on the North Shore in particular are either pre-K through 5 or K through 5 elementary schools, with their middle schools being 6, 7, and 8. And I didn't know if there would be some sort of a cost savings on that. I know enrollment is down across the district in all 3 elementary schools. And again, this is not a personal attack because I lived on that other side of the fence. But do all 3 of the elementary schools need full-time assistant principals? Because I know there was a time during COVID, Brian, right, one of the last leadership meetings that I attended, which is what forced me to go out a year earlier, was we were looking at cutting the elementary school assistant principals. And I didn't want to see that happen at Pine Grove. And that's when I went out a year earlier. That was part of my reason for leaving. My other question is, and this might not be popular, but it's what I emailed you about over the weekend. In 2007 and 2008, the entire Triton administration took no pay raises for 2 years in a row. I didn't know if that is going to be considered. I lived it, you lived it. It sucked, basically, but it was the entire district, and all school administrators took no pay raise in 07 and 08. So I'm just throwing that out as some things to think about, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, appreciate it. I mean, that's the goal here, is to come up with ways and possibilities for savings. So On those three things, I would say with regard to sixth grade, it is on the table. There is, I don't believe, I mean, certainly, I guess we could consider it. I don't believe there's a short-term fix for bringing the sixth grade to the middle school and having it be a cost savings, right? I mean, there would be some construction involved to figure out how we move them in. That is something, both with the acceptance into the MSBA program, it's outlined in the letter, right? Where there's movement across districts. I know Manchester, Essex is talking about it now. Georgetown is already there. Pentucket moved there with more of a combined kind of 7 through 12 campus, leadership, all that. As well as the other end of that is leaving it a middle school, high school separate and bringing sixth grade up, right? A true middle school, Chris, as you know, right, is pre-K through 4 is elementary, primary, 5 through 8 middle, 9 through 12 high. So all of those are on the table for discussion, including bringing sixth grade over. But I don't believe it would be I would confidently say there's no short-term savings to do that right now. And I don't honestly know. I mean, I think it would be more long-term savings and efficiencies rather than a change that would yield short-term savings like we're talking about this year. So on the table, yes, it's a valid discussion. And there are people who believe strongly that the sixth graders belong at the elementary school, and it keeps those sixth graders young. And then there are those who believe strongly that those sixth graders should be at the middle school, because the sixth graders bring up the level of discussion of the fourth and fifth graders, not in a positive way. So that on the table, but that I think is a longer term discussion. As far as assistant principals at the elementary school, and I would say also the same thing with asking administrators to not take a raise. These are just different times. We struggle to keep people employed and staffed. The current numbers include an increase in salaries for everyone, including those who are not contractually guaranteed one, administrators, myself, right, unless it's documented in a contract. I don't know that principals would stick around given the level of increased level of need, largely. We've talked about the social and emotional and behavioral needs of our students these days. Both Pine Grove and Newbury were asking for an additional, they have a half-time, they share a social worker. They're asking for each to have their own full-time. That's not included in these numbers. I don't know that, could we do it? Of course, right? There are districts that had done it in the past and went in the other direction, specifically recently. And as far as the administrators taking a no increase, I had included and proposed some salary corrections because, again, like we do with the teachers, the school committee's goal has always been we want to be middle of the pack. We don't want to be, knock on them, but we don't want to be Masco or Linfield. I mean, we would love to be. We can't afford to be Masco, Linfield, where they're always paying, right, the highest salaries. We also don't want to be others that are our neighbors that are paying the lowest salaries and literally can't attract educators, staff, administrators, and keep them retained. So I think in the spirit of what you and I did, Chris, I know we were part of that back in 07 and 08, what we did 18 years ago. We were living in a different world in a different time. We were living in a time when you advertised for a assistant principal or a principal and you got 40 applicants. You advertised for a teacher and you got 400 applicants for a fourth grade position. That is just not the world we're living in these days. So that I worry more about the challenge and what that says with our educators. I think if we were talking about that and talking with our contracts or our unions rather, and having a discussion and collectively talking about that, it would be different. But I think the vast majority of our administrators are nearing the point of burnout. And it's now public, I can share, right? Beth Yando was due to be here another couple of years. And she just said, you know what? I love this job so much, but it's time. And the numbers added up and she's retiring in June. So I worry what that does for us being able to, it's already been challenging with administrators. And so I don't want to put us in a place where we can't keep people here. I don't know. Linda,
Elise?
several hands here.
Christine or Brian, I just had a question about the research that you did, Christine. And are there 1 or 2 or 3 bullet issues that moving the 6th graders into the middle school will effectuate a savings?
Yeah, I'm just assuming we wouldn't need as many teachers. I don't know what that it was just something that I'd been thinking about. Even when I was principal at Pine Grove, I thought it was more appropriate for the 6th graders to be in the middle school. And again,
Would agree. And assistant principals.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So those were just my thoughts. And
Yeah,
Brian,
I would say,
I just wanted to say, I hear what you're saying. It's a different time than it was 18 years ago. I do not disagree with that at all. But on the flip side of that, it's also a very different time for police and firefighters than it was 15, 20 years ago too. So
And for our employees, we only pay 55%
for
of
health
their health
insurance.
insurance. It's going up double digits. We have openings in every department, especially police and fire, because we can't get people because we can't pay them enough either.
So we get it.
Paul Mayette?
yeah, I was just gonna say for Paul's question, I don't think there is quick savings on the 6th grade. Again, I agree with Christine. I personally think it's appropriate to have them as middle schoolers. I don't think it would be short term. And I don't, even if we did, like Christine said, right, could we use, would we need less teachers? Probably, if we're talking about departmentalization and such. But they would be costs that we would be talking about with construction and rehabbing and kind of reconfiguring. That could be part of a building project. That wouldn't be part of something we would be doing separately. So.
Thank you.
Paul Mayette?
I just wanted to put this out there and kind of get the read of the room because this conversation went immediately to cuts. The schools are currently underfunded. We wound up at a spending freeze last year. We're dancing on the edge of that this year. We are not, as communities, upholding our civic obligation to provide what our kids need. It's just not happening. We've got as much of the leadership of these 3 towns as I've seen in one spot here tonight. Personally, my feeling is that it is our responsibility as a group to guide the town towards doing what is right. And I think that what is right is certainly not beginning with cuts. But I recognize that I tend to be in the minority in that opinion. And it needs to be said that what we're talking about right here is abdicating our responsibility as leaders and telling the citizens of the towns to do the same. And, I don't believe that I'm going to win that particular argument, but I think it needs to be clearly stated that that is what we're making the decision to do, if that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Paul. Michael?
Paul, as you know, I agree with you 100%. It frustrates me because I know I have 23 students last time I was told that English is a second language in our elementary school. We lost a grant to that. Now, being married to an immigrant, I know how much that matters to someone who speaks a different language. That being said, the school's growing, budget's growing faster than the 3 towns can keep up with development. I think you watch every one of our town meetings, and the citizens do not understand. They have 2 options when funding things. Either raise the taxes on what they pay or develop. The problem is all 3 towns, we can sit here and you and I feel the same, but the majority of the 3 towns do not feel the same. And that's what the 3 towns right now, we're struggling. We're trying to, I know Salisbury, Neil, Ronnie, and I have been having a lot of discussions. Could we get to the 1.1? We sit down with our finance director. There's absolutely no way without an override. So we had the discussion trying to get there. But you can watch the town meetings. The people don't want to, I mean, look what's going on with Raleigh. I feel bad for the Raleigh leaders. They're getting crucified by residents who don't know what they're talking about. And Raleigh's trying to say we need to develop. We gotta keep up with the budget. They're not keeping up with the budget in Raleigh, and the residents don't want more development and they don't want to pay more taxes. Well, what that's going to result in, unfortunately, is more cuts at the school and their services. Because contractor agreements are ironclad. You can't change them, right? Salisbury, what we're doing, we hired an economic developer and we're going out to our residents. We're trying to convince them that, hey, we have two options here. Either raise your taxes or develop. That's why we're looking at Lafayette, Elm, and Bridge. So we're trying to get ahead of you guys. The problem is you're going too fast. Every year, I've been on this for 3 years. What is it? Almost $3 million in 3 years towards Salisbury. That's a lot of money. So the problem is we need to convince the citizens of our 3 towns, not this board, not everyone on here. We get that. But the citizens at town meeting don't care and they're not raising their taxes. And they don't want development. So we're caught in a conundrum here. It's not the elected officials who represent the towns. It's not the town managers. It's not the administrators. It's not you guys. But we can't get anyone to agree with us on this. So I think our message is that we need to go out and have the hard conversations with people. Because when I can tell you, towns start cutting senior centers budgets, libraries budgets, I can tell you people are going to be thinking about raising taxes. And the only people that care about these kids are the parents when it comes down to it, and we don't have enough votes. That's the problem, Paul. I agree with you 100%, and I think everyone who is on this Zoom call agrees with you 100%. We just don't know how to make the numbers work right now. That's it, Linda.
Thank you, Michael.
Well said, Mike.
Is there anybody else that has any comments?
Linda, Mike was good on that one, but also what's hard for us sometimes is we know there's going to be operational costs that are going to go up. But when we have declining students, it's sometimes hard to tell our taxpayers, and I know, I can see Paul, raising his head, but it's whether it's reality or conjecture, it's still the nature of the game. They say, why don't we have bigger classroom size? Why don't we do, so that's another issue too.
That's our job, to lead, to get out there and get the word out. That's what we need to do. That's our job.
Well, I mean, am I pro override? No, we haven't had an override in a long time, but I'm not positive that an override would pass. Then what? We'll see how Raleigh does with an override. It sounds easy to solve, but if an override doesn't pass, the town doesn't feel the way we do on that issue when it comes to, educating our kids. So, we don't have any abilities beyond that, Paul. But that would, I don't want to push this any further, but if there was an override or cry for an override among the towns, like I think it was Neil that was saying, it would be for the schools to really be active in pushing it through. You would be the heroes. We would help, but it would be heavily grounded in, the need for people to get out from schools that are in the schools.
Nerissa, did you have anything?
I was just going to offer and say to Jeff, I mean, I do think that this is a you know, it is on us all to sort of have these answers. One of the things that we've really tried to do over the years, I think, is sort of, I don't want to call them elevator pitches, but you know, the 30-second answer, like, let's figure that out and sort of write it down and use it over and over again so that we're all sort of using these same examples and whatnot. And I think it's really easy. It's not easy, but when someone sees 64 students down in a given year, they're picturing 2 classrooms. And when you can say to them, well, that's, you know, K through 12 across 5 schools. So that's not 2 classrooms worth of kids. That's, you know, 4th grade over here and 1 in 5th grade over here and, you know, 2 in 9th grade over there. I think it becomes a lot more obvious that you can't drop teachers. If we can help you with any of that, or, you know, you can send people to us, right? We're more than happy to do that. And that's, you know, we've strove, I'm not sure what the the variable on that verb is, but you know, we've tried to do that for our legislators. Like, we have sort of, you know, we know the way it works, and I think we're happy to sort of give you a 30 seconds, you know, on how that works, if that's helpful.
And Marissa, thank you. You've done that before. I'm just speaking to what, you know, perception still is.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be again and again and again and again, right? Because the conversations are sort of happening, you know, around a coffee table or, you know, at your local diner or in the lobby of town hall or wherever it happens to be happening, you know, standing on a street corner in front of the post office, right? And once those ideas start to spread, it's a lot harder to sort of get your explanations out there. So I think, you know, we are going to have to say it again and again because those questions and doubts have already been spread. You know, there are individuals in every community who are speaking up over and over again, right, in that way. And we have to get good, correct information out there. And we're going to have to do it again and again and again and again. And that's what it comes down to is making sure that there's an understanding of how things work. I mean, even today I pulled data on school choice for people. I pulled data, like, you know, there were many past enrollment, things like that, right? We can get that data if people have questions. I think we just need to keep having those conversations. So I hope everyone will join us in having those conversations, because I think that's the only thing that can move us all forward.
And once again, I mean, every year we can come to because I imagine a lot of people watch the select board meetings, that we can come to select board meetings and explain the budget and why it is the way it is and how the state assesses the towns. We can continue to do that as well. And maybe more people watch the select board meeting than they do the school committee meetings. I don't know if there's other places that the towns can recommend that, I won't call it a show, but to bring the budget meetings and explain things for people wherever it needs to be explained.
Linda, can I make a suggestion real quick on that?
Sure.
You know where we need to go? Every single senior center. They control votes. They control a big voting block. We need to go talk to them. We need to engage those people.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if taxes are raised, they're on fixed incomes. It's the biggest burden when it comes to taxes are on our seniors. They have fixed incomes. And unfortunately, a federal government, I mean, like my dad's girlfriend was complaining she got a 2.5% raise, but her rent went up 4%. So she actually lost money. Didn't get a raise, she lost money. So the seniors are the ones we need to talk to most about this problem because the parents already know. They're gonna. I can. Just from what I heard with the cuts, that the conversations that were about the cuts, the parents are gonna feel it next year.
Yeah.
And
that's a great recommendation.
And the seniors got to feel it too. We have to spread this across. If everyone wants, you know, be Stonewall, I'm not raising my taxes. I'm not doing anything more. not gonna have growth. I don't want this. I don't want someone building next to my house. Well, they're gonna feel the pain too. That's how it has to be spread across the board. Two most vulnerable people, our children and our seniors. And if the towns are feeling the pinch, they're both gonna feel it.
Yep. Thank you. We have a school committee meeting shortly.
And Linda, real quick, sorry, there's 2 comments for Peterson Sulu in the chat. I don't think he can speak.
Do you want to read them?
Sure, I'll do my best, Peter. Just kidding. It says, I think we should identify the percentage of people who are parents that have children in the school system and then work on those households with retired folks that have grandchildren and don't want to see the level of education get decreased. I don't think it's as lopsided as people are saying. If we took a vote, most parents and family members, I think if the choice came to cutting $1 million or having an override, the override would ultimately be passed.
Well, I guess as we go through this budget season, we'll probably see a town or so that may need to do an override. And we'll see how fruitful those words are, Peter. So we have a February 12th meeting, which would be the tentative budget vote. February 26th, we'll be doing budget deliberations. March 5th is the public hearing and March 12th is the final vote. My question to the DCC is we do have a tentative Thursday, February 27th DCC meeting. Does the DCC meeting still want to hold that meeting?
If I can just suggest, and I didn't say this to you previously, Linda, I think given the way what we've talked about, I think it makes sense to hold it, specifically because we'll have a tentative vote next week, and I think we won't be able to articulate all of the cuts, so there'll be some kind of and yet to be determined cuts. We'll come back to you by the 26th and make sure that everyone's clear on exactly how we would get to that target number for the tentative budget. And then we would have an opportunity to have that discussion with the towns the next night. So I think it makes sense. I know it was tentative on the calendar, but I think it makes a lot of sense to hold it.
Okay, so we will be having a DCC meeting on February 27th at Triton. I want to thank everybody for being here. As you see, it takes a village to do all the work that needs to be done here. So we are gonna leave now because we have our school committee meeting in 1 minute.
And school committee members, it's a separate link. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
So this meeting's closing.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a nice
everyone.
night, everybody.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity. Have a good night.
Thank you.